So this week, Palo Alto became the first South Bay city to adopt a ban on certain products. And also this week, Palo Alto Weekly finally saw the sentencing of a man who had hacked our company's websites in 2015. So we'll talk about both topics on this episode. Gennady, starting on the city beat, I just want to say one word to you, just one word.
Softball.
Plastics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to be trendy, as that line implies, but right now all the rage in Palo Alto and cities elsewhere in the state is about eliminating them. Mm-hmm. I guess the oceans have changed since the time The Graduate came out. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of citizen support for curbing on plastics, which of course are notable for often slipping through the sorting process and ending up in the creeks. Mm-hmm. And so this week the city council took a big step and basically banned all single-use plastics. And we're talking about straws, we're talking about utensils, stirrers, those little green things you put in a Starbucks cup into the lid, whatever they're called. Any tiny utensils will soon have to be compostable or just not given out. So, big step for
that is city. A big step. So, what is it about Palo Alto that made the council amenable to adopting this kind of ban? Because other cities haven't moved forward on that. I think San Francisco has banned foodware. Yes. Foodware, new term.
Yeah.
Utensils.
A lot of foodware talk this week.
So what is it about Palo Alto? Did it have anything to do with the sustainability master plan?
Well, it had a little to do with the plan, but as we know from many other efforts, a plan is just a plan. It means nothing unless there's political support. And in this case, it was different with the plastic, the issue of removing plastics, as opposed to things like housing or grade separations. In this case...
Traffic.
Yeah, traffic. In this case, the politics aligned well with the sustainability master plan. There was virtually no opposition, or actually there was no opposition to the foodware ban in this week's meeting, despite the fact that it might cost the grocers and restaurants a little more to switch to compostables. And so this is one of those cases where the plan is effective because it aligns with local politics so well. And the plan, just for anybody who's not aware, which is probably most people, 2016, the city adopted a sustainability climate action plan, which has all sorts of strategies, not just about plastics, but about all sorts of like carbon reductions, everything from electric vehicles, strategies. Building codes, And from that came another plan, the Zero Waste Plan in 2018, and that identified I think it's like 48 strategies, including these for reducing the waste. And the goal is to divert 95% of the things Palo Alto throws away by 2030. So this is supposed to help the city get there. So the plan has something to do with it, but the politics enabled this plan to not be like so many others that we've seen.
And if you throw Girl Scouts in there, then it's like a sure thing, right? So last year, a Girl Scout troop kind of took this on as one of their advocacy projects, it seems. And it proved extremely effective. Girl Scout Troop 60016, who got to take a bow this week, in April 2018, they had this big presentation. They declared like the Straw Awareness Month, which was going to be May of last year, 2018. And they reached out to a ton of restaurants. They got like 37 of them to commit to only supply straws on demand. Some well-known places like Dan Gordon's Counter, there's a whole list of them. And so, in a sense, the Girl Scouts did a lot of the city's work for them. It's easy to kind of just, pat a group like the Girl Scouts on the back just because, you're doing good work. But in this case, it was actually like almost a substitute for intense staff work. This was a huge civic lesson for them too.
It was a huge civic lesson, and I don't want to like take credit away from Palo Alto's public works people. I mean, I think Phil Boble is like a veteran of these kinds of initiatives, and he worked very closely with the Girl Scouts. So it was like a very fruitful partnership between the city and the Girl Scout troop to raise awareness about this issue. And I think that kind of helped sell the politics of it. And when it got to the council on Monday, like, who's going to vote against the Girl Scouts and in favor of plastics? We're a long way away from the Graduate.
That's right. So let's break it down. So what exactly is banned as of January 1st, 2020?
Plastic straws, plastic utensils, plastic drink stirrers, plastic drink plugs. So that's the word drink for those little green thingies. Plastic food and drink picks. Plastic drink accoutrements, which I don't know what it is, but I guess it just refers to very tiny objects, whatever their function is. If they're a certain size.
Hold a cherry, maybe.
Perhaps. Umbrellas.
Good question. They didn't get into the drink umbrellas.
Yeah,
But,
if they're plastic.
But all the things I just mentioned. And in addition to all of that, plastic produce bags, which, as you may recall, is one of the few things that was excluded from the city's plastics ban. And just to remind our viewers and listeners, 2011 to 2013, the city became very aggressive about cutting back on single-use plastic bags.
Yeah.
But
That's why we all started carrying reusable bags
yeah,
to the grocery store.
a lot of us have. Yeah, it's true. And produce bags were still allowed, but they too will be banned soon. Which
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to ask about that because I understand that the proposal is to remove plastics from our kind of everyday life in 3 phases, but the city only adopted phase 1 for now. It didn't make any promises about the other 2 phases. Is that correct?
It didn't make any promises, but it does have a timeline. I feel like it's sort of, I mean, promise might be a stronger word, but it did lay out its plans for the next few.
Okay.
It seemed like it's pretty set on adopting them. It just wants to give businesses more time to adjust.
Yeah.
And the next 2 phases, like the next phase, phase 2, we're talking all disposable plastic foodware, including like clamshells, those containers. Disposable foodware for dine-in. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can't dine in and have a
If you're going to
plastic
go into
fork.
like a hole-in-the-wall Chinese restaurant, they can give you like a styrofoam container to eat inside.
Okay.
And fluorinated compounds and compostable footwear. And then the next phase, the last one, that's basically banning single-use disposable foodware for takeout, which seems really significant. Seems like that would be a huge step.
Yeah.
Because I don't know,
What are we
like
going to get our food in?
Tupperware,
Bring our
reusable.
Tupperware?
What are some of the
not sure.
materials, for example, that might be used? Like I have seen some clamshell things that might be made out of like corn, some sort of corn type product, that type of thing.
I haven't gotten into the
Cardboard.
chemistry, but I know that if you go into Whole Foods, they already use compostable takeout materials. So that's a good question for the Whole Foods people,
yeah.
because Palo Alto does have like pretty good leadership as far as local grocers. So Whole Foods is already there.
Yeah. Molly Stone's, I think, has the paper containers, which I think are the same ones they use in Whole Foods.
Yeah, they're kind of
Similar.
like cardboardy for
Cardboardy,
taking out. And I
yeah.
know that their utensils, I was actually there a few days ago, they're compostable. So in a sense, maybe that's part of the reason why there hasn't been that much opposition. The zero waste plan, the Girl Scouts, and the fact that many of the businesses are already there. So.
Yeah.
And one last thing about the produce bag thing, the foodware, the single-use foodware ban, that's something that a few other cities have done, including San Francisco and Malibu. But the produce bag, that's actually something that Palo Alto is going to be the first city in the Bay Area to implement. So it's kind of a big deal, pretty
Yeah.
dramatic step. And
Yeah, I mean, I have seen these green produce bags that I think are compostable, or they're of a different nature. So it's not like people are not going to get produce bags, correct? It's just going to be a different
they'll be compostable. Yeah.
material.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I'm really wondering about is, how you get produce sometimes like in these plastic mesh bags? What about something like that? I mean, it's not only environmentally, a bad thing, but it's also something that birds, if these things get cast off, they can get their beaks stuck in, things like that. Have they looked at anything like that?
Are we talking about reusable bags, or are they single use?
No, they're single use.
Well,
They're mesh type of bags.
and they're not compostable?
Yeah.
They haven't discussed it specifically, but I'm
Well,
guessing
it's
that
something
the
that
barometer
they're
would
sold
be,
in, basically. So as opposed to just things that consumer, it's part of what consumers are involved in, right? Because they're buying these things. So if you buy like a bag of apples at the store, for example, and it comes in these plastic mesh bags, I mean, these are very destructive to the environment. So I wondered if they have looked at anything like that.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I don't think they specifically talked about that at any point in this band. Yeah.
So the one thing about regulations is one size fits all can sometimes create harm because there's different situations. And in this case, I know Stanford Healthcare kind of came out and raised some concerns about its application to the hospital cafeterias and patient rooms. And then also some people either who have disabilities or have relatives with disabilities also expressed some desire for tweaking of the ban when it comes to plastic straws. So what were their concerns and where did the council land?
Well, the council accommodated their concerns pretty amiably. I think everybody was happy with the final product. Stanford's point was basically we're happy to follow the new ordinance when it comes to our cafeteria, common eating spaces, But we would like an exception just for patient rooms because people might have conditions that require them to use a plastic straw. Certain other kinds of straws may decompose too quickly, that kind of stuff. And so staff clarified on Monday that that will be an ordinance. Basically, they have to abide by the law when it comes to non-patients eating, but when it comes to treatment, you have to, prioritize the patient's medical needs.
Do what's
And
necessary.
there's also other exemptions. If there's like a major emergency and you need like emergency supplies, they're not going to require everything to be compostable. They'll give the city manager the right to give exemptions for like really kind of those kinds of scenarios.
Okay.
And as far as like individuals with disabilities who are not in the hospitals, but that's not going to be in the ordinance. But basically, Phil Boble, the Assistant Public Works Director, said that staff plans to address that through the regulations. So it's not in the law, but basically the rules of how they implement the law. You could expect them to have some kind of rules saying that if you're disabled and you absolutely need this device, it will still be legal.
Oh, okay.
So staff accommodated these requests pretty much,
Okay.
and I think people were pretty happy with the final product.
Okay.
Will that affect how things are disposed of as well? Like, let's say you're using the plastic straws and you have an exemption to do so, but then when you have to throw it in the garbage, what happens then?
Presumably, it would work the same way as it's happening now. I haven't seen the regulations because they haven't been written yet, but they said they're going to write them. But I imagine the rules won't change if you have disability, but it's conjecture until they actually come up with them.
So just like we bring reusable bags to the grocery stores, are we going to see more people bringing mugs and cups to like fast food establishments, or?
I think
Is that the
not
idea?
this year, but probably next year, because as part of phase 2, which is going to kick in later, obviously, because it's phase 2, they're going to the city plans to start charging people for single-use cups.
Okay.
So my trips to Starbucks are going to be 25 cents more expensive, unless I do what Veronica does and bring my own cup every time. And there were people on Monday who actually thought the city should implement all 3 phases immediately, including Alison Cormack wondered why they couldn't just start charging people for the cups immediately. And I think the city wants to give businesses a little more time to adjust.
Yeah.
But yeah, unless you have your own cup in about a year from now, start bringing that extra quarter.
Drinks are getting more expensive. Okay. All right. This won't come back before the council in any fashion, will it? Like when the regulations are written?
Yeah, there might be like a second reading, kind of quick automatic approval, but I think
later
it's
this
good to
year.
go. I think next time we'll see it is when they come back with a second phase
Okay.
and talk about coffee cups and clamshell containers.
Okay. All right. Well, we're moving from something that happened quickly to something that took a pretty long time.
Almost 4 years.
4 years. It took 4 years after Palo Alto Online and associated websites were hacked in September 2015 to get to the sentencing of the hacker. It involved an FBI investigation, surreptitious recording, several mental health competency evaluations, and the alleged involvement of a third party.
Yes,
So we're
full of
gonna-
intrigue.
We're going to talk about the mystery. It started with a mystery of why were we being hacked, and I think we all remember that. What did we do, or what did we allegedly do? I would say that the message that was put onto our websites was in the end it made sense, but at the time it didn't. It said, "Greetings, the site has been hacked. Embarcadero Media Group (Almanac), which was not spelled right." Has failed to remove content that has been harmful to the well-being and safety of others. So we were all starting to think, like, at the very beginning, what did the Almanac do?
Right.
Palo Alto Online is maybe the larger site, maybe more well-known. It seems like it would be something, a grudge against us, but it had to do with the Almanac. That was September 2015, and by 2016, the FBI had already identified a suspect,
Yes.
Ross Colby. Who was Ross Colby?
Ross Colby he continues to be a software engineer, and he actually specializes in like cybersecurity. So he was working for a while, at any rate, for a bank in San Francisco, and was in charge of making sure that the large clients were in compliance with security procedures and helping them, and they were really large clients, like Goldman Sachs and Verizon and those kinds of companies. So But Mr. Colby also had a lot of disabilities as well. He had been in a very bad car accident that caused him to have some brain damage, and that actually played into, in part, the sentencing and why he really received a pretty lenient sentence. He could have done up to 10 years in prison, in a federal prison, for what he did to us. But in fact, he got a much, much lighter sentence, and we can get into that.
Yeah, let's talk
as
about
well.
that. What is...
So the sentence, actually, he, because of we have to step back a little bit and look at the competency as well.
Okay, maybe we can just stick with what, what the actual sentence was.
Okay, so the sentence itself was, he got credit for time served, which was about 5.5 months, roughly. He got 1 year of home detention with electronic monitoring. He has to provide us with $27,130 in compensation for,
Restitution
for damage that he did to us, and pretty much just there'll be 3 years of supervised probation once he's allowed to go out again, and he can't have contact with us. There are a lot of restrictions on his computer use. He has to notify the government about when he's using a computer. There are restrictions to his internet use, and he can't use like any cyber programs, anything for security or anything that would basically enable him to, do more hacking. So
I'd say that the twists and turns in this case actually happened after the jury started its deliberations in May 2018. During the trial, the prosecution and the defense really just focused on IP addresses, some testimony from a former roommate by Colby. And it didn't actually address why he would have done this, what the motive could have been. But when the jury was deliberating, that's when court documents were disclosed to Embarcadero Media that Colby had claimed to the FBI that he was coerced into doing this hack by a third party. Who was that third party?
The third party actually was a Menlo Park man. His name is Rui Emanuel. He no longer lives here as far as we know. He's in Ethiopia at this time. But he apparently had a past in which he had been arrested for, I guess, for drug dealing and some other issues as well, and had actually done 21 months in a federal prison. He, as part of this, it was a major operation that Menlo Park Police and others had been involved in, and brought down a number of people, mainly in East Menlo Park. So he actually sued the police department, Menlo Park Police, and a police officer in 2013. Reason being is that he felt that his civil rights were being violated because he kept getting stopped by the cops, and he didn't believe that there was a justified reason for it. So he and his attorney...
That was settled in his favor.
Yeah, it was settled in his favor for, I think it was like $500 or something like that. But meanwhile, Sandy Brundage, who was a former reporter for the Almanac, had reported on the case, and the one that involved the I guess the
lawsuit.
The lawsuit, right. But what happened was that in the process of her investigation, she discovered that Emmanuel had this past, this sentence. And so she, like most reporters, she put that in the story. That's what she would do, right?
Right.
And so Emmanuel and his attorney said, that they contacted the Weekly and they'd said they wanted that stuff taken down. And since it was true and it was a conviction, basically we refused to do so.
Yeah. So let's talk about how that information came out. So Colby had an interview called a proffer.
Yeah. Okay. So
in 2016, and he disclosed that information to the FBI.
Yes, he made what was called a proffer agreement, which is basically I have information that I'll give you in exchange for leniency and or dropping some charges or whatever, And in this case, what he revealed was that Emmanuel had supposedly threatened him and coerced him into doing this doing what had happened here, which was to basically hack our computers. Initially, and we don't have an exact timeline on this, but we know that it was before the actual major hack that brought down our system. Because Colby had said this, had admitted this in some of the documents, that he basically went in and changed the names of the parties who were involved in the lawsuit and changed like Emmanuel's name.
Yeah, so there were
things like
two
that.
articles, and one was taken down completely, and the other
Yes.
one, the names had been changed.
Yes,
to
one
made up
was
names.
basically, the article was taken down, and the way he did it was he basically added a link that when you clicked on the article name, it linked to another story, basically. And then sometime thereafter, I guess this apparently wasn't good enough, and Emmanuel, because they couldn't completely erase everything. There's the Wayback Machine, there's internet searches. There was ways basically that were...
So this is what Colby said?
Yes, and basically there were ways that things were still up there, and so basically to punish us, and also he couldn't get rid of our PDF versions as well, that they just took the whole system down.
Yeah.
But we didn't know anything about this, and apparently the FBI and the prosecutors never asked our publisher or our IT people whether or not there was anybody.
Yeah, so
such
that's
as this
interesting that
involved
the
in this.
FBI didn't pursue this lead, and that the assistant U.S. attorney said that they didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, I think they felt that Colby's story was so outlandish that they just didn't believe him. And then over time as well, as the judge had pointed out in court, there were a lot of embellishments. That things got more and more...
To Colby's story.
Yeah, to Colby's story. As he would retell it to the court, or they basically would get more and more involved, and more worse things were added into it over time.
Yeah. So as you said before, he's out of prison now, and we will be compensated, get the restitution. And I know from just talk around the office, we're all glad to have us, in the past, to have it wrapped up.
Just a quick question. Did he ever demonstrate any kind of contrition in the last few court appearances?
No. And his attorney, he did want to speak, basically, at his sentencing, and his attorney shook her head and said no. So I don't know what that was about, other than, they were getting a good deal, and I think that she didn't want him to mess it up in any way. So he never did express contrition, but he did offer to help us to, he gave some advice on how we could strengthen our security system. And
So we have his job application on file now?
right. So, but I just think over time that he had tried basically to demonstrate, he did go into great detail about how he did the hack, and that information was valuable to both the FBI and to us as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think some people might be wondering at this point, is there any prosecution or investigation into Emmanuel? And from our standpoint, there is not at this point. The FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office said they couldn't find him. We got a statement from his attorney last December saying that the FBI hadn't contacted him at all, but at this point, the trial is over, the sentencing is over for Colby, and that wraps things up for...
That wraps things up
From
for
our
now.
standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, this thing has had so many twists and turns. It's just been so bizarre on so many levels, and
it's a very interesting insight into how the FBI works and the federal prosecution system, and the lengths of time it takes to get things done, the wheels of justice, as it were.
yes, and that's not unusual. I mean, the 4 years that we experienced in the court cases that I've attended for many years now, I can tell you that sometimes, when these criminal cases, there's a lot of back and forth, and there were, there was actually, I don't know whether or not we talked about the fact that there were some issues that the court wanted resolved in terms of competency. They wanted to make sure that he was absolutely competent before he was sentenced, because that was something that his attorney raised.
Yeah, there were two separate evaluation periods
for
him.
And he spent time in Santa Rita jail at first, and then he spent time in federal prison during these competency hearings. And so then that was, subtracted from his sentence.
All right, well, thanks for the conversation this week, and that wraps it up. We'll see you next week on Behind the Headlines. If you think there are people who are interested in this either one of these topics, please share this video by going below and clicking the share button. You can share it on social media or email. And stay up to date on Palo Alto News on paloaltoonline.com. We'll see you next week.